The most important decision you need to make when selling your product or service is to identify your ideal customer profile. You need to make sure that your product or service aligns with your customers' pain points so that your solution can solve their problems. If you don't identify and target your ideal customer profile, you end up making expensive mistakes by wasting valuable budget on branding and marketing that does not speak directly to the customers that you want to attract. In this video, I will show you the steps you need to identify your ideal customer profile. I will show you both from a B2B perspective, if you're a company selling your product or services to other companies, and from a B2C perspective, if you are directly selling to consumers. And if you watch until the end, I will provide you a link to a PDF worksheet that you can download for free, which will help you fill out and create your ideal customer profile. Hi, I'm Radu Medan. I'm a designer and brand strategist. I help companies like yours target their ICP and avoid making expensive mistakes when branding and marketing. What is an ideal customer profile or ICP, and how does that help you get a better customer? Your ideal client profile is an essential framework which should help you figure out who you want to sell to, who you should spend your marketing budget on, and who will bring you the greatest value. It is essentially the client that you most want to target with your services or your product offering. It is essential for you to figure out who your ideal client profile is because it is impossible for you to sell everything to everybody. If you only get one piece of information from this video, remember the following mantra. If you're selling to everybody, you're not selling to anybody. You have a certain product or service that is very targeted to a specific buyer. You have to be very intentional and targeted when it comes to your clients. You can't possibly serve everyone. Whatever product or service that you are offering at a specific price point is ideal for a certain type of client. And that's who you're trying to identify. There's an often mistaken notion that it's the buyer who selects the seller, but you have to look at it as a win-win. In other words, there's two parties involved. Just as much as the buyer selects you as the seller, you're allowed to select your own buyer, in other words, your own customers. It's not only up to them. If you don't want to work with a certain type of company or client, you don't have to. So why are you trying to get everybody as a client? It's more important that you select who you want to do business with. If you're in B2B, that may be a certain size company or a certain industry that you are trying to offer your services to. And if it's direct to consumer, that may be somebody that earns a certain amount of income. Maybe you have a premium offering that only certain people can afford. Or maybe your product is for a lower income and then it might be a larger market. But until you know who your ideal client profile is, you can't possibly target them successfully with your branding and your marketing. Now, just as you have an ideal client profile, you also have an ideal enemy. That's the person that you want to avoid. And that's the people that most of the time, I see people doing this mistake, is that you're wasting your marketing budget on these people. And they're just as important as your ICP. Because it's critical for you to select your customers or your clients that you want to deal with. You also have to watch out for the antagonist to your ideal client, in other words, your ideal enemy. There's no point in trying to target them with marketing. So until you identify who your ideal client is, you can't possibly know who your ideal enemy is. Let's look at the 7 essential elements of an ideal client profile and how you could identify each and every one of them. I've listed out the following essential parts of an ICP. You've got your demographics, your geographic, your firmographic, that's more for B2B, your buyer persona, which we will look at in 2 perspectives, your psychographic, your behavioral, and your technographic. I wrote B2B here, but it also applies to B2C. In this video, we're working through these 7 steps so you know how to identify your ideal client profile. But before we start working on the steps, let's look at 2 characters who are looking to find out and identify who their ideal client profiles are. I've broken down the characters into 2 different types of lawyers who are looking to identify their ICPs. Lawyer A is a 50-year-old managing partner at a larger corporate law firm, working out of DFW or Dallas-Fort Worth. Why did I pick that? No reason, it just sounded interesting. Lawyer B is a 32-year-old lawyer who practices family law at an independent firm, maybe 1 or 2 partners at the most. Again, let's say out of Dallas-Fort Worth. So in the case of the first lawyer, perhaps the firm used to do more corporate litigation, something along those lines. And because they are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, perhaps they would like to go into something along the lines of environmental compliance. So they're going to look at it from a business-to-business standpoint where their services are going to be targeted towards other companies. Whereas lawyer B works in a smaller family law firm that generally deals with things along the lines of divorce or child custody, etc. Maybe they want to continue to do this, or maybe they're looking to move laterally, something along the lines of immigration law, who knows. These are the two lawyers that are going to use this framework to identify their ideal client profile. The first part of this framework is the demographics. That speaks to the who that we are targeting. Now, the demographics are going to be a little bit broader than when we talk about the actual buyer avatar. Later on, when we see the buyer profile, it's going to be more specific to a single person. But right now, I just want you to think a bit in broad terms. So age, you might think 18 to 25 perhaps, or 65 to 80 if you're targeting retired people. Gender, here it could be either men, women, or it could be both genders, etc. The education level, are you targeting college level graduates, high school level graduates, no education whatsoever? And then the broader occupation or the sectors that you want to be looking at, and their income level. Part 2 is the geographic. This is the physical location where your clients are going to be. Ideally, if you can narrow this down as much as possible, it will be super helpful because you're going to be targeting exactly the people that you want to serve. But that's not always going to be the case. Let's look at the example that I gave earlier with our two different types of lawyers. The first lawyer that is working in the corporate law office is located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, they may be targeting energy companies, oil companies with their environmental compliance services that they want to offer. So they may go a bit broader. They might do Houston. They might go, again, even lower. They might go to Louisiana or all along the Gulf Coast, offering the services to different kind of companies. So they might be a little broader of the area, not only serve Dallas, Fort Worth, but larger than that. They might go to the entire state of Texas, perhaps Oklahoma, Louisiana, etc. Now, for the family law attorney, they might still be working out of Dallas-Fort Worth area, but maybe they want to specifically go to certain neighborhoods that are either underserved or that could use their services. I don't know any neighborhoods in Dallas-Fort Worth, but they might go to the neighborhood level or target certain communities in certain areas. So that's how they might go about looking at the geographic location. This, of course, will also define the way they do the marketing, whether they go strictly more generalized on their SEO for their websites, etc. Now, the next section is called Firmographic, and this is more of the B2B or the business to business because we are talking about companies and sectors that the first lawyer might be targeting. Here, what is important is, the company size. I mean, are we talking small, medium, large companies? What is the industry that they're working in? So remember, we said energy, oil, and maybe drilling companies, offshore companies, everybody that represents that specific sector would be included here in the firmographic outlook. They're going to look at revenue. If we're talking about lawyers that are probably billing $500 to $1,000 an hour, not everybody could obviously afford that. So a certain company in an energy sector would have to be significantly profitable or have the income necessary to be able to afford those lawyers' services. That's where the revenue is looking at. Then you might look at number of employees, okay? Think of employees as 0 to 10, that's like a small sole proprietorship company, maybe 10 to 50 is the next step, 100 to 500, and then 500 plus. And then finally, the growth potential. Is this company on an upward trend? Are they seeing year-over-year improvement? That might be a consideration they're looking at because they might want a long-term relationship. They might be looking at companies that are growing or at least are stable enough that they can count on billing for 1, 2, 5 years down ahead. Now we're getting into the buyer persona. In this section, we're going to go very granular and target one specific person. In the case of B2C, when you're dealing directly with your consumer, this would match obviously very close to your ideal client profile because you're selling directly to them. In the previous section, when we were talking about B2B and a specific company, behind that company, there's going to be a decision maker, either a manager, perhaps a VP, a C-suite executive, somebody that we're going to now specifically outline so we know who we're targeting. Since companies can't make decisions on their own, there's always going to be somebody behind it that is going to buy from you. That person we're also going to define here in the buyer persona. And in this section, I'm going directly to the workbook that you can download for free later on. So in our case, we're actually going to start giving this person a name, your buyer persona. For the first avatar, let's say we're targeting somebody by the name of Alice. She's a female, age maybe 27, and here's the marital status. Because we're talking about family law, maybe she's divorced or separated, especially if the law firm deals with these kinds of cases. Let's, for example, say that this is an alimony case. Maybe Alice is trying to get some back pay so that she could be helped out. Maybe she has lower income. Her title and role, what does she do for a living? Maybe she is a cashier in retail. Let's say for income level somewhere around 45K, so she might have some financial struggles. Industry is she's working in retail. And the region, again, we said DFW, and then here we might specify a neighborhood. Her job history has been retail, cashier, and perhaps her education in this case, who knows, maybe she just did high school, maybe some community college. Community groups that she is part of, maybe her church or perhaps, like a daycare. So in this case, the family law attorney is going to look at getting her more alimony payments. Maybe she's a single mom, so that she's got to take care of a few things. But what if the roles were reversed? What if this family law provider wanted to target disadvantaged husbands or former husbands? Maybe it's one of those cases where a parent, the man in this case, the husband that would have been divorced, is looking to get some custody or perhaps to reduce his alimony burden. The profile will be a little bit different, right? It would be from the perspective of the divorcee husband, things might be a little bit different. So here it's really up to the family law attorney to identify who they want to help. So if they're helping, let's say the women in general receive alimony payments, then the ideal enemy would be the divorced husband, right? I mean, they're not trying to target that part of the family law dynamic. And inversely, if they are trying to target maybe disadvantaged divorced husbands who have been quote unquote screwed by the system, their ICP is the husband. And in this case, Alice, a buyer avatar, would be the ideal enemy. We don't want to waste any time trying to market to them. Now let's look at the first lawyer, the big corporate law firm. So he's targeting an energy company with environmental compliance legal services. Perhaps his ICB would be somebody, I don't know, let's call him Bob. We had Alice, let's go Bob. So Bob's man, maybe he's around 45, and maybe he's married with 2 kids. Title role, maybe he's manager of environmental compliance, maybe he's a VP. The company size is medium or large. His income level, I don't know, let's call it 250K a year. Industry is obviously energy. And since we're talking about a specific person, maybe his region in this case might be Houston. Let's get away from DFW for a second. So looking at Bob's job history, maybe he started in the trades. Maybe this is a drilling outfit and not a refiner. So maybe his education would have been either trade school or community college. Or perhaps not. Maybe Bob started right away at one of the large refiners. So maybe he started in the chemical division, for which perhaps he then would have had a college degree or a postgraduate degree. And now he slowly moved up to the environmental part as through promotions and long time in the company. And then community groups, again, maybe he attends church, perhaps not, maybe something along the lines of a Rotary Club, maybe like a golf club or business associations and other marketing groups. So in the case of the corporate law firm, this is somebody that they're going to look at to see if they're a decision maker in the company that they're targeting. Remember, behind every company, there's actual humans that make the decisions. So this is just as important for the B2B lawyer as it is for the B2C lawyer. In the second part of the buyer persona, we're going to look at their day-to-day activities in their life and see if your solutions or your services and products can alleviate some of their major pain points. So looking at the first section, that's the daily responsibilities, right? The daily grind, what they do, job, or in life. In the first example, when we spoke about Alice, the single mom, she obviously will go to work every day. Maybe she has to go to daycare and, she has to do the cooking. And in the professional and personal challenges, so we're going to look at personal challenges, right? The major pain points that the family attorney is going to try to solve. Perhaps she has budget shortfalls, right? Because she's not getting enough alimony, there's going to be a financial constraint on her life. That might be one of the major pain points that the second lawyer is going to try to address. If Alice got in touch with the family lawyer, what is a good outcome for her? Well, obviously, alimony might go up, financial burden would be alleviated, and she might be able to either place her child in a better daycare or just not have that lingering feeling that she's always working paycheck to paycheck. And then skills or product services required for success. What product or service of yours would fit their needs? In this case, the family law, that's simple. They'll be able to renegotiate the settlement terms or go back to the courts and either increase alimony or get a better judgment for Alice. Well, what about the corporate attorney? What would that look like for Bob? So what might their daily grind be? Well, they might be in meetings often, right? That's all the time. They might have to do compliance reporting. Bob's entire job is making sure that the energy company that he works for is complying with the environmental regulations of that industry. So what are his major pain points that you aim to solve? Let's say that the previous law firm that he worked for wasn't always up to snuff. In other words, maybe they weren't as quick on legislation, maybe they missed a few loose ends, or maybe they didn't report on time, and then as a result the company had some fines to pay. So then how would Bob define his success? Well, obviously he's going to be compliant with regulation. He's going to avoid fines, and maybe that'll get the regulator off his back, or that's the big success, and he might avoid getting sued or whatnot. In this case, then, what would be the services or products that the first law firm would provide? It might be a service of up-to-date regulatory, or it might be an easier way of reporting. Think along those lines. So that's the services or products that would make sure that Bob gets the success that he's looking for, or you're alleviating his pain points. Part 5, Psychographic. This is where we talk about the values, interests, attitudes, and lifestyles of the target audience. This includes customer motivations, behaviors, based on their personality traits, their goals, and their social status. Here you could again go a little bit broader and try to look at the entire segment that we just spoke about in the buyer persona. So if we look at example number 1, Bob, the middle manager. So here the law firm might target middle management, VPs, C-suite executives when they're considering this segment. And then you would look at what are the common values and interests and attitudes of these people. Perhaps their values might be professionalism. They want to have, corporate success. Their interests might be something along the lines of maybe they play golf. That's pretty common. Perhaps they like to volunteer some of their time. Maybe it's time for them to give back. They have a cause or a charity that they might want to contribute to. Personality traits, probably they're more likely going to be A types, assertive. They know what they want. Their goals might be upward mobility. As far as the company, maybe the VP that wants to become a C-suite executive one day. Their lifestyles and social status most of the time is probably going to be middle to upper middle class. That's their financial bracket. So that's when you, again, come back a little bit from the buyer persona and see what the group of individuals have going for them in this particular element. You have to be able to speak to this kind of a person because you want to know what motivates them, what their goals are, so that you can message or speak their language and get them using your products or services to get them along their path. All right, part 6 is behavioral. This is customer actions and patterns, including purchasing habits, brand loyalty, product usage, and engagement level. Now, in both of our examples, since we're talking about lawyer services, it's not necessarily directly a product that you're selling to people. It's going to be a little more difficult, but imagine that you are trying to sell a product, a widget. You're going to want to identify what other products that are similar to yours that your ICP will be buying, when they purchase it, how often they purchase it, what are the price points. Because if you're targeting them with your product in that market segment, if you don't have this kind of information, again, you're not going to be able to target them specifically. I'm taking an example of the services that you're offering. Perhaps you're not selling directly a product. However, it does help to still kind of know where your clients are shopping, what they're buying, what their brand allegiance is, how they spend their money. If you're targeting higher net worth individuals, you're going to want to know the brands they associate with, what their spending habits are like, what kind of disposable income they have. Even though you're not selling them a product, your service still has to be able to speak to them at their level. However, if you were targeting lower income people, then you would have to know again that their buying patterns may not allow for any disposable income. You would have to price accordingly. You would have to know what kind of brands they associate with that as well, so that whatever your ideal client profile is, you're able to target and message them at the level that they expect to be messaged to. Finally, I want to look at the technographic part. This applies to both B2B and B2C. For example, if you are a SaaS company that wants to offer a different solution to a CRM, for example, you're going to want to know what your ICP is already using for CRM, what kind of platform they're using. Maybe they've already they've already committed to certain large brands. You got to see where they fit in. If their network infrastructure supports it, if their computer systems support it, and what technology stack they have. This also works, of course, to B2C. Let's say that you're an app developer that maybe created a yoga or meditation app. You're going to want to know, well, what's the technology stack? Are people mostly using Android? Are they going to use iOS? What kind of phones they have? So again, it's important even for the B2C customer to kind of try to work out what the technology stack your ICPs are using and seeing how your product or service fits in within their already existing environment. Let's do a quick recap of the essential parts of an ideal client profile. So we looked at the demographics, that's age, gender, sex, religion, etc. We looked at the geographic, that's the general area where they're located, even going as granular as a neighborhood for some, or maybe a wider net for others. From a B2B perspective, we then looked at the firmographic, or the companies that you're targeting. Are they small, medium, large? How many employees they have? What kind of income or revenue that they generate, and what industries they're involved in? And of course, behind every company, there are an actual humans. So that's when we started to look at the buyer profile, even from a B2B perspective, that would be the decision maker in the company that you're targeting. And from a B2C perspective, that's your direct client, the consumer that you're selling to. After which we looked at the psychographic, think about the motivations, the values, and the goals that your target ICP has. See how you fit into their goals and directions that they're going. We then looked at behavior, which touched upon their buying habits, the brands that they associate with, the presence, so that you see and speak on their level. Finally, we looked at the technographic, or their technology stack, to see if your service or product fits within it. Maybe in your case it's irrelevant, but it's not a bad idea to still have that in the back of your mind, because you never know where that bit of information comes in useful. And we also touched upon your ideal enemy, why it's important to avoid them. And as I promised, popping up on the screen now or in the description down below is a link to a free PDF workbook that you can fill out, which will help you create and identify your ideal client profile. It is an interactive PDF that you can either print and fill out by hand, or fill out the forms inside the PDF, which you can then save or print as well. If you've gotten value out of this video, give it a like, leave a comment, and share the link with somebody else you think might enjoy watching it.